And we turn those negatives into positives, and then you're still left with a big old list, 25 miles long. And we narrow that down to 3 rules, or I'm sorry, 4. Be respectful, be responsible, be safe, and be kind. So everything we do centers around those rules, and as we use positive language to redirect kids, to remind kids, to reinforce behaviors, we call those skills and those expectations to mind. So for example, as we're walking through our extended learning areas and we notice kids are doing a great job of learning, they're on their Chromebooks, they're sitting next to a friend but they're still working. Thank you so much for being respectful of the person next to you as they're learning. Thank you so much for being responsible for your learning. As they're playing on the playground appropriately. Thank you so much for being safe, appreciate it. As they're walking out the hallway and maybe they're getting a little nudgy, whoop, thank you for being safe. And you remind them on all of those things. And we have rewards that we give. In our particular school, we give pride points for whenever we see whole classes of kids, single students, groups of students, and then once a week we see what class got the most amount of pride points, and they come up with a classroom party. I think this week we saw Julie Heights was having freezer. She thought it was going to be a great day to have a second recess yesterday. It turns 50 and everybody gets excited in Columbus. We're like going to wear shorts. So she got popsicles, and they went out they had to stay inside because it wasn't great weather, but they stayed inside for a second recess. And really, the main thing about those expectations is that you say it all the time. It just becomes part of your culture. It becomes part of your nature. So culture is really important to us at Prairie. Every day we have a chant that we say, respectful, responsible, safe, and kind. We remember those. We say all the time, do all things in love. When we redirect students, when we have conversations with kids, you tell me if what you did was doing all things in love. You tell me if that was, because we have to have corrective conversations. And so our job mainly at the elementary is to instill those good expectations and those good character traits and then reinforce them positively. And when we do have to have corrective conversations, we do so with the intention of teaching and calling back those characters so that they always understand what it is that you're expected to do. Anything to add?
At the elementary level, last year we instituted a kindness week in February, and that has been by the teachers has gone over very well. Small little morning meeting snippets where we talk about kindness, we reinforce kindness, but it's also about getting to know your peers. So finding somebody who you didn't know you had something in common with, and just some little activities like that promotes the inclusion piece, the getting to know each other piece, as well as just simple like good morning handshakes and my name is, that kind of thing too. So that was something across the board we did at all of the elementaries that the counselors and I worked on, and it's something that the kids and we have Spirit Week that goes along with it to make it really fun and engaging for all.
Hi again, Josh Frame here at the middle school, and part of our PBIS program is building off of what happens at the intermediate where they have RISE. And here we have core values of scholarship, ownership, awareness, and respect for us to soar. So as they rise at BWI and become ready to soar at the middle school, one of the most important parts of that is getting our students involved. And so as we celebrate those each month, we have students that go through and organize a SOAR cart. And so a SOAR cart is some of our student leaders go into each of our advisories and celebrate the accomplishments of our kids. And one of the things that's really embedded into our PBIS program here is trying to shift away from extrinsic rewards to be intrinsic rewards. And so the way that we do that is all of our teachers work in teams, which is critical for middle school, meaning that every student here has 4 core teachers that those 100 kids all share the same 4 core teachers. And those core teachers all meet weekly to talk about the needs and supports of middle level learners. And one of the things that they do is they write SOAR cards. And so they pick out those positive traits, identify those positive traits, and then share those out as our SOAR card will go in each month and celebrate within those students. And so we really want the celebration to be the words coming from a trusted adult, an adult that they've built a relationship with over the entire year, to build them up and have Yes, they can get some trinkets and maybe a couple other things and candy, but really that intrinsic reward being the positive within our positive behavior intervention and support program. Other things within the middle school, we do have a Stomp Out Bullying Week that's in October each year, where we have a speaker come in and share. A lot of times it's one of our staff members and working with them to share out a positive message about empathy and understanding and growing that support. And then we have a number of outdoor activities where, again, trying within those teams to build those strong relationships, but they get to go out and practice those in a realistic way by going and playing some games and having fun. So just building those relationships and really just being a place as we walk through this area, we want everyone to feel like this is home. From every staff member to every individual, we all come and live in this space and we want it to feel like home. And ultimately it's trying to build a culture of this is our educational home. And that's what we want here at Big Long Middle School.
I'm Jeannie Collett, one of the counselors at the high school, and I think that at the high school, we build on what everyone else has said. So as they move up each level, we try to keep those skills and those core values with the students, and part of our PBIS program is called RED, and the E in RED stands for empowered. So we want to make sure that not only are our students recognizing how they're feeling and how others are feeling, but that they are also being empowered as they're about to go out to the real world to advocate for themselves and to get a feeling for who they are and what they are willing to tolerate or not tolerate, and recognize what they're doing and what their footprint has on everyone around them. So we really try to make students have some self-reflection at the high school and try to understand what they are putting out for other people to perceive and what is actually meaningful that other people might be projecting on them. And does that have true feelings on you, or is that something that we don't need to put a lot of value in? So we try to focus on that, but we also strongly believe that connections are super important at the high school. So that adult connection is very important, but we also feel like the peer connection is important. So we have a lot of clubs and activities that students can do, whether they just want to make a friend and hang out with their peers, whether they want to take leadership roles in those and join our Eagles First Flight and be mentors to the younger students who come into the school. But we really strongly believe in connections and making sure that they feel empowered to be the type of person they want to be and allow what motivates them to be with whoever they would like to be in the world.
And I'm Ross Linscott, Director of Student Services. So as an administrator in central office, who's not boots on the ground in each building all the time, I support the work that these administrators, these counselors, and teachers do. So from a district administrative perspective, we provide the necessary training for our teachers to implement these things. You heard that the acronym PBIS a lot. That stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Supports. So here we are full of alphabet soup here in education. So with that too, we look at existing board policy. We look at any needs to update policy. And with that being said, it's kind of timely because right now our positive behavior intervention supports it's tapped in with a limited use of restraint and seclusion policy. Just went through its first reading for a revised policy, just went through its first reading in February and is up for a second reading and a vote with the board coming up at their next meeting in March. So that's something that we do from the district perspective, is look at policy and making sure we're updating it and being able to train staff on implementation of that.
Hi, again, I'm Mike. I'm the Director of Academic Achievement. Everything they shared is amazing stuff. Just one other aspect, because there are so many things that we do on day-to-day at the building level and district level to help have hundreds of kids peacefully and positively coexist. So I just wanted to highlight another one. It's different at every level, but K through 8, through our response to intervention process, is often thought of as academic, but if you sit in those meetings, teachers at every grade level are sitting down and talking about students not only through an academic lens, but what are the other contributing factors that might be supporting or impinging on their success. And the conversations that you hear teams of teachers having, whether it's the grade levels at the intermediate and elementary schools, or as Josh said, at the academic team level, always encompasses not only their academic achievement, but also things like attendance and especially behavior and their feeling of belonging and connection in the building. That's true too at the high school level. I know one of the things that I'm very proud of and the counselors are always happy to share about is that they have sit-down meetings with every student one-on-one at the high school level every year. And I think those kind of connections, as Jeannie shared, trying to build connections not only between students and adults, but students and students are part of that. And we just don't set aside these kind of ideas when we're talking about academics. We understand that's just a part of the whole child. So even in those conversations, we're talking about these things and how adults can help support kids in creating a positive environment.
And each of our elementary principals puts their own spin on what their positive behavior program looks like. I've walked into PRE before, and she's getting ready to do the party cart and literally puts a hat on my head in LA and is like, let's go. So, whereas others, GRE, they do a quarterly store, so as they're earning rewards, the kids are earning rewards throughout the grading period, they're getting GRE bucks, and then they get to go shop at the store for different trinkets, and I had the opportunity to help with that probably about a month ago, and some kids have several $100s, and other kids have, maybe $56, and the items are priced according to the really cool stuff is expensive, and the little rubber snake is not. I remember, and they don't have to spend it all. They can save it up for the next time the store is there. And I was helping as the cashier, and a kid was like $4 short. And I was going to be like, oh, it's okay, you're close enough. And no, that kid hasn't earned it, so put it back and save up for next month or get something less expensive. And the kid didn't really throw a fit. They knew what the expectation was. But everyone kind of puts their own spin on things for the kids in that program. So when a student or a parent brings a concern up to you, whether it's actually classified as bullying or it's just kids are picking on one another or they're teasing or just being unkind, I know you all are looking at it, but talk us through, what you're doing. What are some of the interventions that you put in place when you become aware of the situation to either help alleviate it or prevent it altogether?
Before I answer that question, I do want to point out, I do remember one time him in a purple boa because he came at party cart time, and I was like, here we go, yeah. All right, when those situations arise, first and foremost, I think, I know that if a parent is to provide a call on the phone and we talk, my first line of question to them is always, how can I help? It's important to recognize that, that is their baby, and they are ramped and to always understand that they've heard one side of the story, and it's my job just to listen and to validate how they feel, because their kiddo came home with a big emotion, and that can send all of us into mama bear, papa bear moments. From a student perspective, it's important to understand who is involved and to listen and to talk to everybody and to question and to listen and to listen and to listen. So as human beings, none of us are perfect, none that are sitting up here. All of us have been in this situation before. It's hard not to have bias, especially if it's a repeat offender, if you will, right? That's possible. It's always, poor Johnny, whoever Johnny is, he always gets picked on. But Johnny is, Johnny did this, and Johnny did this, and Johnny did this, so it's hard when I've had Johnny, and then I have to have a conversation again, like what happened. I always, thankfully I've got a lot of experience now, but stop and say, tell me what happened. And it's always that statement, tell me what happened, and let them go. And then it's important to understand who did it happen to. Sometimes you get the kid that did the thing, but who did it happen to? And to really ask, well, why did you? If you kick somebody, what happened before that? What did so-and-so do? Because there's always a reason. You don't just kick somebody. You might, you know, to be funny. Kids always have reasons behind things, but if there's a negative emotion about it, you got to understand what got you to that negative emotion. You need to see if there's other witnesses to corroborate the story, and it's all just asking and letting it come out and letting kids talk. Because we can lead with questions and we can say, did you do this? Did you do that? And that's scary for kids in a moment when they're talking to the principal. Even though I like to think I'm just going into mom mode and trying to solve things. For them to say, yeah, that happened. No, that didn't happen. You tell me. So, and then summarize. So what I'm understanding is you did this, but prior to this, you did this. And then for me in those conversations, it's being able to validate the kid that kicked so-and-so because he was mad, saying, you're right, because this one stuck his tongue out at him and he was mad about it. You're right, that would make me mad too. And it's validating that emotion, right? Nobody's perfect, humans feel all these things. But to talk them through those scenarios, to then help them understand what you did was annoying, and this made you mad, but there's a better way to deal with that mad. How could you have done that differently? You don't just haul off and hit somebody. I get mad all the time, Mrs. Hogue. I mean, we've done these so many times, right? You get mad, Mrs. Hogue? Yep, I get mad, but I don't haul off and punch Mrs. Hogue. Like, that's not a thing. So what could you have done differently? And at elementary school, and I can't speak to middle school and high school, but I'd like to think it's the same. It's about teaching in that moment, and it's about stopping and telling them what strategy they can do and what they could have used, what they could have done differently. After that, when you get to a place, and we believe in a restored, I shouldn't say restorative, but an apology that I'm sorry for, I did it because, next time I will. Do you accept my apology? And honoring, maybe sometimes Whitney's not in a place where she wants to accept my apology, and that's okay. But we need to get to a place where you can accept an apology. And then from there, it's about putting things in place. Do you feel comfortable with Kim? If you don't, then great, we're gonna still well, let's just take a time out from each other. You know, if I can't trust you to be safe around kids, I've got to remove you from those kids for a little bit. And it's not about you being bad. You're not a bad kid, you make a bad choice, right? And so being able to keep everybody safe, and that includes emotional safety as well. That's what creates a warm and welcome and good environment to learn, where kids feel comfortable. After that, there's parent phone calls on both ends. I don't ever tell the other parent the kid's name. I say, I know so-and-so's going to come home and tell you who it was with, so they'll figure that out, because then that privacy needs to be protected. And I do have parents that call back and say, well, are you going to call them? And it is always a response of, I'm so glad that you trust me. I'm asking you to trust me to know that I will handle the situation appropriately. Because again, that's a private conversation, you know? And so I know that's very long-winded, shocking, it's me, I'm sorry. But listen, get the whole story, and then teach, and then provide those phone calls to the parents and help them understand all the conversations that you had. And then of course, ending with, if you find out something different, please call me back.
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, you did a great job starting on that. And I think the main point with that is, again, seeking first to understand what the situation is by talking to everyone involved, you know. And I think part of that is we know, you know, kids are kids. We make mistakes. Kids are going to make mistakes. And part of that is that teaching process is, you know, and one of the sayings that I've used throughout my education career is, you know, trying to get kids to that self-discipline. Self-discipline is really the best discipline that we can go through and identify. And so what practices can we put in place for kids as they go through to have those conversations, to think about what can you learn from you know, whatever situation came your way. So in terms of, you know, other potential outcomes, we talked about you know, facilitating those conversations. You know, here at the middle school, one of the things is, you know, trying to get agreement from both students, like, hey, what's the end goal? What are we working towards here? We all have to live in our home in this place together. So what does that look like as we have conversations? And often it's, hey, are you on board with us getting together and having a conversation about what happened? And then facilitating that conversation and helping our students learn that process of conflict resolution is really important. That we can model that as adults, but then also take the opportunity to purposely teach about how to engage in those conversations and use I statements in situations where here's what I felt happened, here's how what happened made me feel, and then we can reach some resolution some of that, restoring of relationship that obviously is what we desire when there's a negative interaction between two people. And that really is dependent upon, both parties being ready and looking for that type of agreement. I think so we're making those determinations and checking with parents, along the way, say, hey, here's what we'd like to do. We feel like this can be beneficial to get two students in the room and talk about what's happened, talk about how we can continue in this way. Hey, you're going to be on the same football team next year. This isn't, let's work on restoring a relationship through a conversation. And those ones obviously are the ideal result. There are other types of things that come away in terms of, in the event that as we're working through these, whether or not it's a discipline consequence or stay away agreement, schedule changes, but it's all based on the situation after we have a full understanding of what that is of talking to everyone that we can.
I think at the high school, we do a lot of that too, where we really want to make sure that there's that safe connection for communication, where they can share what's going on and say what they need to say. And I'm just going to circle back to we really try to empower the students to say what it is that they need. So if there was a conflict, what do you need at the end of the conflict? What's the perfect world? And then how can we try to get there if that's possible? And then we also really want to make sure that we have that wraparound care for all students that could be involved. So whoever feels like they were wronged has support. Whoever maybe made a poor choice, they have support to make sure that we understand why that was not a good choice and perhaps other ways of doing it again. So I think that wraparound support of making sure everybody knows they're cared about whether they made a good choice or not, creating that environment where people do feel comfortable communicating and being able to say what it is that they need to be safe and move on and grow as a young person.
What are, just for the people that are here, they may only have a kid at one level, what are some of the behaviors that you see? Like if a kid comes and says so-and-so is doing whatever to me, or a parent reaches out, like what are some of the common things that you're seeing?
You're not going to be in trouble, let's just have a conversation. But they don't understand the gravity of those words. And so it's about educating and saying, when you said that you weren't just joking. Let's not pretend we're joking. Let's be honest. So I see mean words, sometimes that are meant in anger. Sometimes, most times, it's they've heard a word, especially when they got older siblings. Again, thank gosh for Candyland. But when they've got older siblings, they've heard these words and they just say them, and they've got no context as to what they mean. And sometimes we educate them on what that means, and sometimes I will say, that's a conversation you can have with your mom and dad, or whoever it is that you live with. And then on my end, I'll say, just so you know, this is what came up. So I think those are pretty common themes.
Surprisingly, it's some of the same things in terms of inappropriate or hurtful language, or someone, that peer pressure of trying to make other people laugh, or, taking a joke or saying I was just joking. Those types of things still continue as they grow. And so I would say, one thing we have to understand is, the frontal lobe of these students is not fully developed. Right? And so,
they're 26.
26. And so, again, going through and helping process through, and hey, what were you thinking when I wasn't thinking? Well, yes, that probably could be true, that someone was not fully thinking when they said something. And so, stopping and helping process through, how do you, put yourself in someone else's shoes in those situations. So similar, even as they age, similar circumstance. As you approach those.
Well, at the high school, we also get the same situation where somebody might say something, or we hear last week I had to help somebody because somebody was looking at her. And that was a problem. And so we get situations that are the same, and I think it's just all about how they process. But I think at the high school level, we have young adults, and they are starting to have more of an adult mindset, or they might have deep-rooted feelings that have grown from when they were young, so now they get triggered by something, and it evokes a bigger emotion, and how do they process that? So that communication, that going back to being empowered, what do we want to do with that situation, how can we get there? but it's the small stuff all the way to social media. And how does social media make us feel? And the fact that people can do things anonymously, coming back to what is our self-worth for somebody that we don't even know is posting something, that self-confidence, that being empowered to know what's important to you and what's not important to you, and how do you process that from 14 to 18 is still really hard to do. So I feel like at the high school, are still dealing with small-ish things that even young kids deal with, to now we're becoming young adults, and when we start talking about physical appearances and other activities that go on at this level, there's more. It's like there's just more.
So I'm a district administrator here, but I was a building principal for 10 years as well. I think another just layer to all this stuff is, while it's very serious and can be detrimental to a student, what's relatively uncommon is two students with no relationship having a conflict or getting into a bullying situation. More often it is, especially at the middle level and the high school level, it's fractured friend groups or the shifting of friend dynamics that then turns toxic one way or the other. So I think just to kind of, often bullying is presented as, there's a bully roaming the halls and just sort of indiscriminately. And that, those things happen at school, but I would say they're really the exception. Usually it's much more complicated than that, which also makes it more complicated to deal with, because a person who's experiencing that might be risking not having a friend group if they say something about it, or might be shifting dynamics in their friend group. So navigating those things is complicated. The one thing I would always share with families when I was working through these situations, whether they were bullying or they're more acute and incidental, not cute, acute, sorry, just so we're clear on that one, is that I will say almost every time, if at least one person in the situation wants it to stop, we can get it to stop. But that also means communicating with adults. Once it's brought to our attention, we can start helping to deal with it. And there's a lot of reasons why kids sit on these things for a long time. Much of the ones that I mentioned, it's hard. They may not immediately trust the adults they're talking to. They're worried about what's going to happen. They're worried it might get worse if they mention something. But usually, if you bring something to the school's attention and they're aware of it, as long as one person in the dynamic wants it to end, if that other person in it keeps coming back, as long as it gets reported back to us, then we can deal with that and we can elevate the amount of intervention and monitoring around the situations to get it to stop. But that is really hard, and I think sometimes in these situations, we want this magical third path where I want it to be fixed and I don't want to be involved. And as a person who's experiencing that at school, is on the receiving end of these experiences, that's a really big burden. Because why should I, as a person who's being impacted by this, have to be involved in solving it? It's not their fault, but they at least need to be able to partner with us and let us know what's going on so we can address it. I think that's the biggest thing I would encourage parents and students who are experiencing these things is, while that feels really intimidating, that's probably the shortest path to getting these things resolved. And it feels very big, and it is very big, and some situations can get very difficult, but the fastest route towards things getting better is continuing to work with the school, because as long as you want it to stop, we can eventually, if you say, hey, it happened again today, or hey, we signed this stay away agreement and the student didn't stay away, those are things then that make it so much clearer and easier for us to hold the other student accountable, and then we can eventually get things to calm down.
All right, we're running short on time for this segment, so I'm going to just kind of cliff notes two of the questions I was going to ask because they came up. The cell phone, I will contest, is the greatest invention of our lifetime and the worst invention of our lifetime. So as a parent, make sure you're monitoring your child's cell phone. You're not a bad parent. You're not a nosy parent. If you're asking your child to show you their cell phone to see what they're texting or what's in social media. We did implement a cell phone ban this year. That was the hot topic, I would say, in July, I think, when the board passed that policy. And it's actually worked well in terms of kids socializing, especially at the high school level. I walked in the cafeteria the first week of school expecting there to be riots. And what I observed is kids were actually having conversations. And in the past, you walked in the cafeteria and you would see a table or you would see a group like this, and of everyone up here, almost everyone had their face in a phone. So that's been a benefit, but it's not solved any of the things that some of our folks here have described. It's just delayed us finding out about it by 24 hours. So if a kid doesn't have access to their phone during the school day, they're not going to suddenly not send the nasty text that they would have. They're sending it after school, and then we're finding out about it the next day, as opposed to the kid coming down third period when he received the text. Some discipline, they shared some of the things that they've done. It's a range. One of the things I hear a lot that I've heard everywhere I've been is you have a zero tolerance policy. We do, but that doesn't mean the kid's getting expelled. It's actually illegal in the state of Ohio to suspend a kid in grades K through 3 unless they bring a weapon to school. I can't suspend them. They can beat the crap out of each other, and we can't suspend them from school K through 3. But there's a wide variety of things that we're doing. You heard about conversations. You heard about changing schedules when it's appropriate. You've heard stay away agreements. That's a pretty common one. If it rises to the level of a suspension, then that happens. If it would rise to the level of a recommendation for expulsion, then that would happen. But I've not had one of those in the 3 years I've been a superintendent. I don't know that I've had one rise to that level in the 12 years that I was an administrator. But again, it's not whether it's bullying or not. We want kids to feel welcome at school. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. So we are going to intervene, and we are going to try to do things that are going to make the situation better and make them want to come back to school. So I'll end it with this, and everyone can, I think, chime in on this one. What advice do you have for the parents who are here tonight? And before I pass the mic, thank you for coming here tonight. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate our staff's willingness to be here after hours. I'm a big proponent of that. I'm a pretty demanding boss from 8 to 4, but I have really high expectations for our staff from 8 to 4, but I think they will all admit from 4 o'clock until the next morning, I do expect them to be with their families, not sending emails, not getting text messages from me, so I do appreciate them spending their time here tonight. But final question, what advice do you have for the families that are here tonight? If they're dealing with this, or if they have concerns, you know, what's the best thing that you think they can do?
Listen, talk, get your baby to understand that emotions are normal and they've got to share it. You know, I always say better out than in. And all of us would agree, like, we can't fix anything that we don't know. So when Mike talks about, you know, partnering with the schools, that means if it happens, talking again. But I think at the parent level, it's creating a relationship where your kids feel comfortable coming and talking to you. And that may mean that you're going to go up against some conversations that make you uncomfortable. But do you want them hearing it from you, or do you want them hearing it from their peer, or do you want them researching it on Google? Do you want them seeing it on a YouTube video? And that's just the reality of the situation. So you might not have had those conversations with your mom. I know I didn't, but I didn't want to chance that happening. So, and I think when they come and they talk to you about negative things, trying to remain calm and just say thank you for sharing it with me. I appreciate it. Even if they come to you and say, I did this, thank you for sharing it with me. They need to know that they can come to you and you're not going to freak out. That took a long time for me to learn as a principal. Again, they lie because they're scared. They're scared of the response. So I have to tell them all the time, I'm going to ask you the question again. I'm going to prove to you that I'm not going to yell and I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to look and say, what you did was normal, but we're not going to do it again. And so once they feel comfortable to come and talk, then that can open up a whole that can open up a whole, I don't know, just a whole journey. That's my biggest thing. Obviously, Ryan talked about cell phones. monitor them, help them understand, but be real, get them to talk, listen, and then teach them about life. And I think understand too, there's always two perspectives. So you're getting one side, and if you were a parent, guardian of a young kid, I wish somebody would have told me how skewed children's perspective is, because I've learned that now as being a mom of teenagers. So understanding that there's always another side, and we are here to help. We are here to listen. We are here to listen to your concerns. So even though you're in mama bear mode, you don't have to come at us right away, but a conversation and a partnership to be able to help.
I would agree with Kim. Sitting, listening, being open, and most importantly, not overreacting, because I think that that's where that real fear comes in, because your reaction, even though you're angry for them, makes them feel that you're angry at them. And so making sure that you just remain calm, even though it's hard. I mean, it's a practice that is, if I had a magic wand to create that for myself sometimes, I would do so. But just keeping those lines of communication open between your kids and you, and not overreacting even though you're angry. And even in those moments of anger and sadness that you're feeling for your kiddo, just taking that minute to process it yourself and try to understand it yourself before you shoot off an email or make a phone call, because I have found that I need to process first before I speak, because sometimes by listening and processing it on our own and understanding how that perception could be made by your child or another child, it helps you try to think about all the gray areas in that situation too. And I think that that's an important piece to it too, is taking a minute for yourself to process and understand what your kid is feeling or what they could be feeling before reaching out, but then ultimately making sure that you're reaching out to the school and the adults there so that we're aware, because we don't know what we don't know, and a lot of times that's what gets us in tricky situations, is that we all of a sudden a small problem becomes really big, but it's because we're not talking as adults either, so making sure that you're talking to adults as well.
Yeah, I think I would just also want to make the point that we have great kids in Big Walnut. And for every instance of maybe a negative interaction, we can all sit up here and name thousands of someone reaching down and picking up something that someone dropped, or saying, hey, here's $5 that you dropped at the dance, or supporting. And so we talk about being not just a bystander, but an upstander, that we're sticking up for each other in this space, and supporting each other. And so, often asked in interviews with, going and talking with new staff members, or in the interview process, hey, what's the greatest thing about Big Walnut? And almost every single time, someone on our interviewing committee is going to say, we have great kids, we have a great community. And I think harnessing that is really important, and savoring that, and using that to our benefit when negative interactions happen, knowing that we can rely on each other, and knowing that there's someone that's going to be an upstander for every student within our district.
Yeah, totally agree. Going back and making sure that we're involved in our students' lives, that you're present in what's going on. So instead of always being reactive, being involved with them, checking the phones, having those conversations with them, finding out who their friends are, knowing who the adults are that they talk to, what staff members do they like at school, and making sure they have those relationships and those connections so that they know they have lots of support for them as well as you at the home. So making sure that they're involved in multiple groups is always really important. So if they do have an issue with one group of friends, they're not out, they're not just stuck at home, they have another group of friends that they can go and turn to from a different group that they might hang out with. So I think really being involved, being present in students' lives, modeling that if we do get passionate about something, that we can come back and have a conversation and we can apologize for things, or we can say that maybe our energy didn't match the situation, because that's